Heyo, my name is Sarah, and today's book review is on Little Mushroom by Shisu. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name. Non-spoilers, I give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. We are set in a futuristic, dystopian-ish world where our main character, Ansu, is actually a little mushroom who gains a body. And in doing so, he's on a mission. He's looking for his spore that was stolen from him, and the only clue he has leads him to one of the remaining bases of civilization. But we have a problem, people, because not only do we have to get past the arbiter, Lu Feng, whose job is to look out for people or creatures like Ansu. Once we get in there, things just go bad, okay? We have things that I have to, the best way how I can explain it is basically if someone took that Jeff Goldblum movie, The Fly, and made it into an entire world. And so, I did not feel safe at all. Yes, this world is terrifying, people. I thought it would be okay once we got into, the city base, where there's people and still some shady things going around. But no. A lot of twists and turns happen, and there are these creature bugs, plant life that are just mutated and everything, because this is in the future, and things are just bad and not safe anywhere. So I actually felt scared for my life. As for the main characters, Ansu, who is our little mushroom, it's so cute. He's even referenced as a little mushroom in the beginning. Yeah, he does get into the city, and he has this mission. But so at the same time, he's also trying to pretend to be human, because we have Lu Feng, who shows up multiple times and still is not believing that he is human. So we also have to play with that, as well as Ansu trying to figure out how to live a human life in this dangerous situation, as well as finding clues on how to get his mushroom back. So it's a little kind of thing, trying to figure out our surroundings and everything. And I have to admit, for the first book, I felt it was like a great world building to get us familiar of the dangers that is to live in this world, to where I'm like, just end me now. Just put me out of my misery. But also, I'm just interested because I know that these two are supposed to end up together, and I'm like, how? Because every interaction I saw, Ansu is always on guard around Lu Feng, and Lu Feng's just acting like, yeah, he doesn't trust Ansu, but he also has this weird way of a tease bullying thing going on whenever he's like with him every now and again. So it's like, how did these two become a couple? I want to know. So when the book ended, I'm just like surviving mild heart attacks and just wondering what's gonna happen in book 2, people. But either way, this is completely different than I'm used to when it comes to reading certain novels, because as y'all know, I'm an MXTX fan, and I'm definitely a Meat Bun fan, and I really wanted to get into Priest, but Shisu, this is like the very first time I've actually read a sci-fi story like this. Scared me, and I want to know more what happens. So, great impression. Completely different than what I'm used to, but great impression, and I can't wait to continue on with book 2. And that's as far as I can get into non-spoilers, people. Little Mushroom by Shisu. Again, I apologize if I mispronounced that name. 4 out of 5 stars. Bye, non-spoilers. Shh. Spoilers. We begin the novel off with Anja developing his human body, because there's a human named Ansu who got injured in the abyss, which is basically the remaining outside world that is radiated, infected things, because we have fungi, plants, insects, mutated beasts just really wanting to eat humans. And Ansu is severely wounded. He is dying, and in return he is talking to Anja. He's the one that basically gave him his name, calling him Little Mushroom and everything, as well as giving him his body and memories, because these creatures, things that evolved over time, they can absorb genetic coding, meaning they can also absorb human coding. So Anja is gaining memories of Anzu as well as human knowledge, and while they're talking, because it's like a 3-day process until Anzu is fully decomposed and bones, they're talking, about the human base and everything. And that's when Anja tells Anzu that he wants to find his spore, because a while ago his spore, his version, I guess you could say another part of him as his child, was stolen from him and he didn't know where it went. But he has a bullet casing and he's like, this is probably, from the human base. And in his dying breath, Anzu warns Anja not to go to the human base. But sadly, in his mind, Anzu's like saying, I wish I could keep that promise, but I can't. So when Anja dies, Anzu decides to go to the northern human base, because that's the only place where you can think to find clues on where to find a spore. We have our first encounter with humans that also introduces us to the class of mercenaries. So they're basically the people that leave the base, go around bippity boppity booing, grabbing materials, taking carcasses back for supplies and all this stuff to get paid. And Anzu runs into a group. He gives his ID number that Anju gave him, so that gives him access to the base. And it's a shady group, but one of the guys is cool, the other one's like whatever, and the other one's a creeper. But that's where we're also introduced to another reason why I do not want to live in this world, people. Because while we're on our way, one of the guys, it's like cut or bite, like a little mosquito bite or something, caused an infection that on a genetic level started altering his code, and he started mutating. And this is where I come up with the fly reference, because humans turn into these creatures, things that kind of bit them, and they got away, and the infection began, and we are attacked in a closed space. Luckily, Anshu gets out of the vehicle with the other guy that's trying to be a creeper, but then the infected bug guy tries to eat him, and I'm getting this horrid scene, like, this is chapter 2! But the other guy comes back for Anshu and grabs him, like, yeah, there's nothing we could have done. And they drive back to the base while someone's being eaten. There's a lot of this, people, okay? I have to say this. There is a lot of, I wouldn't call it gore, but there's a lot of death, mangling, blood, and body parts flying everywhere. When I think of gore, I think of Meat Bun, how she traumatized us. This is just one of those things where you just see in films and you're like, there. So if you don't like that, I'm just like letting y'all in fair warning. Sorry I didn't mention this in non-spoilers, but yes, there is a bunch of that when we encounter these things, because it is a ruthless world. So if you have problems with blood, death, being eaten alive, or just the dead being devoured, fair warning. We make it to the northern base, but that's where we have to go through an inspection. So we have judges. They're the people that determine whether or not you are infected, and they are given the license to kill without question. But if you make it through them, you have to make it through one final stop, and that's through the arbiter, who is the one with complete authority to kill without question. You have the judges, but then you have the arbiter, who's basically gun is law, pretty much. And that's where we get introduced to Lu Feng, who is the one that's introduced as the arbiter. And, so, Anshu makes it to the gate with his buddy, and they both pass the judges. But then they look over, and that's when Anshu sees Lu Feng, and he hears a boom. And the guy that brought Anshu with them dies, because he got shot. And now the arbiter is walking over to Anshu, and he's thinking, is it my turn next? But then Lu Feng's like, I'm gonna take this guy to go get inspected, meaning something he doesn't know. Something weird is about Anshu to him. There's a brief introduction that there's this doctor that we see again later on. We don't exactly get a name, but he's developing a machine that can help determine things faster, seeing if a person is infected, basically kind of give competition to the arbiter and the judges. But Lu Feng does take him to go see the doctor, Anshu, just to be sure, but the test comes out negative, meaning he is human, so, it's okay. But that's when Anshu tells Lu Feng that the guy who he shot wasn't infected, he was okay guy, and luckily the body's right there. So Lu Feng said, basically pointed out to a finger, and at the time when Anshu was outside, he noticed that there was like a drop of blood. He thought it was the other guy, but it turns out it was the guy who brought him in. And that's when we're introduced to a different category called Xenogenics, where something completely absorbed the human body knowledge and all that stuff, and is passing around as human, aka something like Ange. But for some weird reason, Lu Feng hasn't been able to determine that he is not human. So, but apparently the guy who brought Ange was Xenogenic, and that's why he was executed right then and there. Interesting. Because he has to take up the identity of Ange, Ange does find where Ange used to live. And he's like, okay, I gotta figure out how to get a job and everything, because apparently the place that Ange used to work at shut down. So that's why he kind of went out there. When he runs into a neighbor named Josh, he's like, oh my god, you're alive. And that's when Ange goes through Ange's memory, and that's when he finds out it was Josh who practically begged Ange to go outside with him. And then he left him to die. So Ange doesn't really like trust Josh, and like I don't trust him too. But either way, we have a problem. We need money. So we go through our little catalog, because there's books that describe how the base works. You have your outer ring, and then you have your main ring, and the outer city, the ring. You have districts, and so we're in a certain district, and there's a market like called the free market, but Ange figures out the rough way that's actually the black market, and he goes there looking for a job. Little kid directs him to the 3rd floor. He's there, figures out what the 3rd floor is for, and he tries to leave when the madam of the 3rd floor, Dacier, is like there. He's like, well, if you want a job, I can give you a job. And he's like, no, not this kind of job, but I need a job. And so she's like, Then that's when she takes him to Mr. Shaw, who is a person that creates lifelike mannequins. Apparently it's illegal, because we're stealing information from people to make actual lifelike mannequins. But because of that, we get a job making mannequins. Just really creepy. And I was like, run. Ange is there for 3 days, and you know he's doing good work. He's figuring things out. He realized he can stay there at the shop because he's the one to run into Josh again. And so, you know, Ange's doing his job, he's doing his thing, he's getting off his 8 to 5 kind of thing. And that's where we run into Lu Feng again, because there's inspections that go on, you know, patrols, and he's also teaching other judges how to look out for things. And he's like kind of picking on Ange, and he's like, you know, talking, and Ange's giving like certain remarks, and he's like, no, and the people are like writing that, and he's like, I just want to go get my soup. And so there goes Ange, gets his soup, his meal. He's going back to the train, just, you know, going somewhere. And that's when everyone's rushing off a train and running. And Dacier is with him. She grabs Ange, and they're all running to a square. And that's when everything is surrounded by soldiers. And we realize the Xenogenics made it through and was on the train. Oh no! We hear a bang go off. So there's Lu Feng doing his job. And he inspects the body, like he gets the scalpel and he inspects it, and there's like larvae in the body, meaning there could be possible other infections. And that's when Ange notices that Dacier has a little burrowing into her, and she's like, oh no, because the guy was literally sitting behind her, and Lu Feng shoots her in front of Ange. But during that time, while everyone's being inspected, because it takes a while for everyone to be inspected, that's when Ange realizes that there's bullet casings on the ground. And these bullet casings are identical to the one that he's wearing, meaning someone from the military took his spore. So he has to figure out how to make connections. After that day, when he was there for 3 days, it's been a month. So the story takes like a span between 2 months. The first month is in part 1, the second month is in part 2. This is kind of 2 parts. So at the end of the first month, we had been giving a month prior to build a lifelike mannequin as the arbiter. And so, you know, creation is done. We gotta call someone to deliver the item. No one's picking up. We called the kid that brought the data over. He's not picking up. So Mr. Shaw and Ange are given the task of dropping off a suitcase of a lifelike mannequin of Lu Feng to a ladies area. And the neighbor shows, and she's like, oh yeah, that person's dead. I was like, we only paid half the job. Who was the person? And that's when they say Dacier. So Dacier hired Mr. Shaw and Ange to make a lifelike mannequin of the arbiter. And now she's dead, and we don't get the rest of our payment. And now we are left with illegal items. What do we do? And so, thinking quick and remembering that Unso lives nearby, Mr. Shaw gives Unso the perfect task of just hiding the body because, he hasn't been living at his house, so no one's gonna think to look there. And so, I kind of like giggled, but then I was like betrayed because Unso does take the body in the suitcase to his place, and he's like, my floor is all the way up there, it's gonna take a while on these stairs. And Josh comes slithering around. He's like wondering why Unso hasn't been around. And Unso is making it perfectly clear that he's like, I don't want anything to do with Josh. Go away. And he's still getting into his personal space when the only person that has a right to fire in any given public shoots around in the air, not hurting anyone. And it's Lufeng. And he's there watching everything happen. He walks over and Unso's like, I still have that in the back. And then Lufeng gives him the code numbers, and it's his contact number. And he said, if anyone bothers you again, call me. I'm like, what? And then he takes the suitcase, and he's like, what floor are you on? I was like, no, I got this, which is the suitcase of the Aperture mannequin. It's like, you're on this floor, right? He's like, yeah, but, and that's up there. He's like, yeah, but don't worry, I'll take it. And he's like literally taking the suitcase upstairs, and Josh is just like horrified right there. And Unso's like, I'm just gonna go. And I'm like, oh my god! I'm having a moment. It's like, oh, he's there to help him. He actually cares. And he goes and he invites him into his home. And Lufeng's like asking for some water. He needs to work on his tune. And Unso does go to get the water, but then it clicks that the arbiter is usually with other judges. He happens to be alone in front of a place he hasn't visited in a while, with him carrying illegal items. And that's when Unso does try to call Mr. Shaw. It doesn't make contact. And we're like, this is bad. He goes back to the room and he sees Lufeng where he left him. He gives him the cup of water, but then he realizes the real one is sitting over by his desk. And this is the mannequin. We give Lufeng the water, and he's like, do you understand why you're in trouble? And he is like, I gave you not hot water, because he's like, this is cold water. He's like, no. He's trying to think of something else, and there's the piece of paper that was given to him on day one, basically saying oppose the arbiter and all that stuff. He's like, I'm not part of any opposition group. He's like, that's not it. He's like, what was the word that he used on Josh for indecency? And he's like, come here. He walks over. He's like, put your hand out. Touch me. And he's like, okay. He's real. Cool. And all of a sudden we hear a click. And it was like, handcuff. And he pulls out his communicator. It's like, suspect arrested. Bringing them in now. I was like, oh, you tricked us. It's like, you didn't have to go that far just to handcuff him. But it's like, this poor boy, this little mushroom brought you water and invited you into his home. And you do this to us? Unso is brought down to the prison where Mr. Shaw, who got picked up just as fast, and the kid that sold the data are there, and they're like, well, we weren't gonna do anything like bad for stealing data on the arbiter. It's like we weren't gonna sell it to like enemies or something. We were just making something. And they're like, we'll probably just be here for like a couple of days. And that's when they hear a voice in the background that goes by the name Poet, who's there for life. And it's through him that we find out things, because he was a reporter and he found interesting items. And this book foretells our future, because the items he found out started at the year of 2020. So those magnetic poles that protect the planet, North and South Pole? Well, during his findings, Poet found out that after a while, close to a few years after 2020, gone, meaning the Earth was vulnerable to radiation and solar storms, meaning Earth was no longer going to be habitable for people. Human society found a way to make artificial poles, just put them around the world, and things were going well for a while. And that was like for 3 years. And that's when they found out radiation had affected things on a DNA level. And that's how we got the ancestors of the creatures that inhabit the abyss today. And things just went downhill for society after that. They had 4 bases. 2 of them fell, meaning East and West are the only things keeping the artificial magnetic poles going, which is why we have the aurora borealis. That's the thing that's keeping the whole world safe for human civilization. And Poet found out the truth. He wanted to spread the truth, and that's why he was arrested. So it's like, thank you, Poet, because this foretells our future. I don't want to be here when that happens. My fear of this world grew because we're literally in a military area base in the outer city that's supposed to be secured with military people. It's not, because remember those little worm thingies, insect bugs, monsters? So we have like this little ultra dispenser thing that sends out ultrasonic waves to keep things out of the city. Well, it's acting as a negative for different species, because all of a sudden ground is moving, shaking. It's not an earthquake, and people are running, screaming, guards trying to let the prisoners loose, and the kid, the moment his door gets open, something comes out of the floor, attacks the kid, eats him, enters another guard, and goes back into a hole with the body. And we are being attacked by 2 to 3 mouth, 2-headed, mutated, long worms. Now all we hear in the darkness, because the lights go out after Unsa uses his little mushroom ability powers to get the keys and let Poet out, are just munching away in the dark. And then they stop and we run. It's like worms, and one of the most secure places right now that we could be are attacking. What? Lufeng does show up, and they throw like flash grenades and everything to attack the worms, and the worms run. And so, you know, Anza is safe with Mr. Shaw and Poet. But Anza did get injured, like a little injury, but people think maybe he could be infected. Well, we know that there's a time period to keep an eye on things, so Lufeng takes it upon himself to keep an eye on Anza. And they go to his office, where he can overlook this whole situation, because, you know, his office is the building that's next to where the prison was, to monitor the situation, because even from here he can tell if people are infected and everything and do his job, while everyone else is being, you know, sent somewhere else. So for a while, time passes, and Lufeng mentions that, but Ansa's like, I don't want to go outside. He's like, why? And he's like, he sneezes, like it's cold, because he's a little mushroom. The cold affects the poor baby. And so instead of sending him out to the cold night to go sleep in the prisoner's tent, he's like, you can use my little nap room. And I was like, so you do care. So Ansa does go take a nap. He doesn't know how long, but then all of a sudden Lufeng's shaking him awake, saying we need to evacuate now. And that's when the whole building is shaking. And they go outside, and there's people scanning the area, and they realize that the dispenser that's sending out the shockwaves are attracting the worms to that area. And this dispenser is supposed to keep everything out. So if that goes, what's supposed to be kept out besides the worms are going to come in. So we have a problem. Lufeng goes with a researcher to try to find the dispenser and defend it, and all goes to hell because they get close to there, they see the area, and he's like, U-turn, because the whole building is covered in bugs that decide to fly. Imagine a whole area full of roaches that were settled, and you've always heard the rumors that roaches can fly, and they take wing and block out the sky. That happens. Also, a building where Ansa, Poet, and Mr. Shaw were relocated to, we get bugs attacking. And Mr. Shaw's like, call your man! Because everyone's been seeing Ansa and Lufeng together. And so, we also know that he has his number. So, at the same time, Lufeng gets a call from Ansa while he's answering all these other calls. And he's like, I still have your things, because Lufeng gave him his jacket as well as a notebook and a ballpoint pen. And the notebook has little notes, and it also showed that Lufeng was the one that took Ansa's spore and brought it to the lighthouse where all the research is happening. So that stuff is on Ansa. And he says, I still have your things, and we're being attacked by bugs. And Lufeng's like, I'm on my way. And everyone's trying to keep things calm, and the bugs out. Lufeng does show up. He does bust them out, and we try to make it out of the district. We go to District 6, which apparently has complete full power, And because the drive is a little bit long, basically Ansa, Mr. Shaw and Poet do make it through inspection because they were with the Arbiter this whole time and it was like a long drive to get there. So Poet and Mr. Shaw go their separate ways. Ansa stays behind because he kind of wants to give the stuff back. And there's a young judge that was always with Lu Feng, who we eventually find out his name, Serang, who is kind of like the Arbiter's possible successor, and he's kind of nice. I kind of liked him. He's the mood that we kind of needed. He's like, oh, what are you still doing here? And Ansa's like, I kind of want to give this stuff back, but can you give it back to him? And Serang is like, don't you want to wait? And he's like thinking for a second. It's like, I'll wait some more. We get a brief reminder that there's some people that are opposed to the judges and to the Arbiter, and they're there with their protest self, not helping the situation because again we're hearing bang bang pause pause bang 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 pause bang 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 pause pause pause, that kind of thing, meaning the Arbiter is killing people that are possibly infected. And so one of a high official that's still on level with the Arbiter shows up, and Lu Feng points his gun at him, and everyone's calling it out because first of all some people stop moving and you have the protesters inciting things, and luckily the doctor shows up with the machine to test, and everyone's saying, oh, it's good proof that the Arbiter is not sound of mind because the other guy he's pointing his gun at is not infected. So they're thinking this will give them reason because they have been questioning the Arbiter's sanity and all this stuff, and they think this will be finally it. Well, the machine, the same thing that we tried on Ansa, takes 5 minutes to test, and everyone's counting down 1 second, and all of a sudden you hear alert! It's not Lu Feng that shoots the guy, it's the guards, meaning it proved that this guy was infected. And it's been a long day. We found out that Lu Feng's been awake for like 40 hours, and Ansa's been waiting for him. He's like, you could have just given it to someone left. Like, I just wanted to give it to you. He's like, I'll escort you out. And that's when you realize like everyone's watching, everyone's quiet, but they're also watching Ansa, who's like purposely approached Lu Feng, and it's like a little scary. He's like realizing, oh, this is Lu Feng, making sure I'm okay. And he's like, so where are you gonna go? He's like, I don't know, I'm just gonna find a place to sleep. And he's like, you can stay at my place because we're in the area where Ansa's apartment is. So he invites him to his house. They do a little wash up, clean up, everyone's tired. They run into Josh. Josh is being weird again, but then Lu Feng puts his hand on Ansha to show like, hey, don't mess with him. Remember what happened last time? And they just share the bed and they just go to sleep. And when Ansa wakes up, Lu Feng's gone, and he remembers the conversation that they had previously because before he went to the abyss, Anju wanted to get a job and he had passed a certain test. So Lu Feng thought that was what Ansu wanted to do, so he gave him a hint how he could get the job. Just you help me, I help you kind of thing. And so he goes to the office to see if he can, do a testing. And if not, and if it works, he can possibly get a job teaching children in the main city where, all the good people are. And at the time, the person that's taking the names and the testing numbers and stuff says, okay, time to all get on the train. And it's like, wait, what's going on? And he's like, it's gonna start raining and we need to go. And that's when Anso's like, but I like the rain. But they all get on the train. Lu Feng and Serang are doing inspections, and they see Anso's there, and they're like, oh my god, you made it. And he's like, why? And the rain starts, and apparently because of that, the ultrasonic waves that are sent out are disrupted, and eventually it's not just raindrops that are falling from the sky. It is bugs, insects, creatures from above and below, and blood completely taking over District 6 while the train is barely making it out. And while this is all happening with Lu Feng by Ansha's side watching the whole thing happen, Lu Feng is talking on the communicator, giving orders, and all of a sudden we see planes fly to, District 6. And Ansha's asking us that to help people, and then Lu Feng says we can't allow human DNA mixed with the other creatures. And that's when a bright light happens. Lu Feng protects Ansha's eyes, and District 6 is bombed. Just end me. Just end me already, because that was horrible enough. Part 2, it's a slow burn of anxiety. So the whiplash hurt, but the slow burn, it just festered. We make it to the main city, and everyone's given their own living quarters, and Ansu goes to his place as well as where he's going to start working next. So in the main city, he goes to work at the Garden of Eden, where all the children are raised, and after a while they take a certain testing to determine whether if they're going to be like, members of main city society, which are like scientists and all that stuff, or go to the military, or sent out to the outer city for adoption. The month goes by for Ansu as a teacher. The kids like him and everything, and he's there, and it's one day where he's going home after being at work. He sees a young girl who obviously looks like belongs to the Garden of Eden, runs into the street. Well, she's getting ready and he's trying to stop her, when all of a sudden someone grabs her and stops her and calls on a communicator for people from the Garden of Eden to come collect her. It is Lu Feng, who we haven't seen in a month. And Ansu is like, kind of happy to see him again, but he's also like, you just like went up and left and I haven't seen you at all. So he's like has these weird human conflicting feelings, and they're like, hi, and then Lu Feng's like asking him, can you help me my way around? He's like, but weren't you from here? He's like, I haven't been back here like in 7 years, because I'm mostly in the outer city or out in the abyss. And so it's like, okay, what's your ID number? So Lu Feng gives it to Ansu. He looks at the numbers and thinks, is this guy making fun of me? But he still guides him. And then Lu Feng's like, why are you still following me? He's like, I live nearby here. And they're still going. They go to the same building. They go to the same floor, and it's like still awkward, and Ansu has like, I can imagine that little thing going above him, and he goes to his room, his door, and he looks behind him to where his neighbor's door is, that was like unsealed the day after he left for his first day job and hadn't seen his neighbor. And then there's Lu Feng that's like looking, he's like, you're my neighbor? And Ansu's like, oh, I swear I didn't know. So why was the plastic undone? They sent people early to refurbish my room. I promise I didn't know. And Ansu's like, I'm gonna go now. But then he watches as Lu Feng tries to open the door with his key, and it flashes red. He calls someone, and they're like, yeah, we didn't upgrade the key. You have an old one. We'll send someone over later for the upgrade. And then they're just like in there, and then he like looks over, and then Ansu's like, do you want to come in? Okay. So it's awkward. It's a cute awkward. That I call it cute awkward. But yes, Ansu invites Lu Feng into his room, his place. He makes a lot of soup. He really likes soup. So he realizes he has to make a little bit extra, and Lu Feng's like watching all of this happen, and all of a sudden he hears like a drip, and he realizes that you have a drip, and he's like, yeah, did you get it fixed? I can't fix it. And in the back of his mind, Ansu's like worried about the rising water bill, and all of a sudden he watches as Lu Feng takes off his jacket, rolls up his sleeves, and starts taking apart his sink. He's like, do you know how to fix that? And it's so cute, especially when he's like literally taking the whole thing apart, and there's a knock at the door, and then Ansu goes to open it, and it's a soldier, and he like invites him in, and he like looks in the kitchen where Lu Feng has the faucet in his hand. It's like, we are terribly sorry, we didn't have this done and everything. Do you have the card fixed and everything? Like, yeah, here it is, I'm sorry. And then Ansu's like leading him out, and then the guard's like, what is he doing? He's fixing my sink. Does he know how to do that? I don't know. And they leave, and then Ansu comes back into the kitchen. Lu Feng has everything fixed and stuff, and no more drip. And so they both have soup together and everything, and they both make sure the key works. When Lu Feng does go back to his room, it does work. The door opens, and Ansu is ready to go back into his room and go to bed, when Lu Feng just stops, like, and then Ansu looks over his shoulder, and then Lu Feng looks down. Not me. I thought that thing was destroyed. Sitting in the living room on the couch in position is the mannequin of Lu Feng that they thought was destroyed, and of course he pulls out the communicator and asks, what the hell, in a different tone. But the person on the other end is like, yeah, it was like saved and everything from the bombing before, you know, the whole thing was blown up, and we thought it was important, you know, evidence, so we decided to like leave it there since it looked very important. It's like, oh, okay, I'll take care of it. And I would like to imagine there's a shot by shot when Lu Feng's told Ansu to wait. I just like want to imagine like here he is, shows up in front of the mannequin, opens up a suitcase, closes the suitcase after folding the mannequin in, and rolls it over to Ansu because he says, "For you." And we leave it there, with Ansu just sticking it in the corner and never seeing it ever again. That was funny, that was cute, that was adorable. I loved it. The children completed their testing, and so while some children are going to be continuing their training, their education in the Garden of Eden, the others are being sent to the military base to begin their training, which is like really young because like they're 6 and stuff. So Ansu, as well as some other instructors, have to go there and supervise the children because again, they're children, they're rowdy and everything. And he's there, and one of the kids starts getting into a fight with another one because they're like talking about, oh, you never saw your friend again and all this stuff, you know she's gone. And he just got really upset, and there's Ansu trying to break up the fight, and look who's there, Lu Feng. And he's there just for a meeting, and then all of a sudden he looks at the kid, he tells Ansu to stand back, like protect wise, and he does, and he checks the kid, and we realize this kid is Xenogenic. And the only reason why Lu Feng didn't shoot him on spot was because he brought him back to the lighthouse, because they had never seen a mutation happen in a child who has no exposure to the abyss, let alone the outer and inner and main city, because they are always in the Garden of Eden. So how is this child showing signs of turning into a Xenogenic? Which is questioned. Because they basically live together, Lu Feng and Ansu do go back to the building, and you know, for all that happened, because Ansu was able to talk to the kid, Lu Feng does treat him to a meal, and they go to their rooms to have a good night. And that's when Ansu remembers that there's a ventilation system, because he knows that there was something weird under his bed, and he knows that there's stuff in the lighthouse just like that. And the doctor had said, yeah, that's a ventilation system that you probably wouldn't have seen in the outer state. So going into his mushroom form, Ansu travels through the ventilation system, gets lost every now and again, ends up in an underground turbine system that was, you know, there to act as circulation. Well, it turns on, and his little hyphia, the little things that grow from a mushroom, get lost because he used that as a way to mark his way through the ventilation system. Well, Ansu takes basically a YOLO moment and just goes through random areas in the ventilation system, and he somehow ends up back in the Garden of Eden, where he runs into the girl that looked like she wanted to run away, actually, and she's like in a little hiding spot, and Ansu is there, and he realizes that's the girl that the little boy knew that the kids were making fun of. So she's there, she's fine, but she kind of doesn't want to be there, and so they just have a little heart-to-heart moment talking, and she helps him get out, like sneak out. And that's when you realize that when Ansu started his little vent adventure, it was night. It's morning now. He's been out all night, and he's supposed to be at the base to watch the kids, and he's at the Garden of Eden, so he's gonna be late for his job, let alone be in a place where he's not supposed to be. And he's like, okay, I look like I still belong, I can get out of here. And he's running, he makes it to the door, and then Lu Feng and Serang show up, and they're like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I got lost. And Serang's like, oh yeah, I get it. It can be confusing when they move people around, but you're supposed to be at the base, so you're gonna be late and everything. He's acting like a saver. He saved Ansu's butt. And then he's like, yeah, I guess I gotta get going. He tries to leave, and then Lu Feng's like, I'll drive you. And so he gets there like 5 minutes early, and he's there before, you know, everything. And he's like, I forgot my card. And then Lu Feng does this little card to beep him in. And it's like, that's when Ansu realizes that Lu Feng has 2 things. When he's in a good mood, he likes to bully. When he's in a bad mood, he likes to ignore. So this is like a weird one in between, because he's like in a bad mood, but he's also bullying Ansu. He also tells Ansu to take half the day off because they're going to need his assistance at the lighthouse. And so the day goes by before the afternoon. He's watching the kids as they're training. And you know, they're kids. They're going to complain. They're like, this hurts. I don't want to be in the military. I want to do something else. And Ansu's trying to, you know, make the situation better while treating their little wounds. Next thing you know, if you become military, you get this cool uniforms. And they're all complaining. It's like, they're all bad looking. And he's like, well, you can make it to colonel. And that outfit looks cool. They really say, yeah, they're really awesome looking. They're really cool. They're really amazing. And they're like, so can we look like him? Like, you know, like that? And he looks over and he realized the person who's smiling at these comments that hurt everything was Lu Fang there to pick him up. So he basically said, you can look cool and amazing like Lu Fang. I don't care what people say. That's what I heard. That's what I heard. But yeah, he takes him to the lighthouse. So does have a little nap on the way because again he didn't get any sleep. And that's when we see the kid that was taken to the lighthouse and was being inspected by the doctor has fully turned, but he still has some mental wavelength as a human that's slightly fighting back. And they bring in Lily, the girl who had this connection. So now they begin this day repeat where they bring the girl because she kind of gets like some things out of the waves of this kid before he like kind of reverts back. He looks like a bee in a way, but he still has that weird wavelength. This is also how Ansu just get ways to get into the lighthouse because he and Lily, they kind of understand each other, and people realize, okay, he could be there to help monitor Lily and bring her back to the Garden of Eden. So he's like, okay, now I have access to the lighthouse. How am I going to find my spore? Now we're so close now that we know the spore is probably somewhere in the lighthouse. And when they go back to their building, that's at the time when Ansu still was missing his card, and then Lu Fang said you can go to someone's place because it could take like 3 days to get a new card. And he's like, fine, I'll go see if Serang can give me a place to sleep for the night. But then, you know, I guess Lu Fang was teasing, so he said you could just stay at my place. They have a little meal, they wash up, they're getting ready for going to bed. But that's when Ansu brings up a very important topic, because a person that's in charge of the Garden of Eden that brought over Lily was Madame Lu, who is Lu Fang's mother. And they just have a interesting, weird, strained relationship, but she had sent roses over, which was deemed safe after Lu Fang found seeds when he was out in the abyss one day. And so it just seems like they have a strained relationship for the job that he chose to do when she thought he was going to do something else. And so Ansu goes to sleep. Lu Fang waits a little bit before going to sleep as well, but at that time I am screaming, Lu Fang, what did you do? Because when Ansu is asleep, sound asleep, Lu Fang takes out a suitcase that he brought back from the lighthouse, and in it is a syringe with suspicious blue liquid, and he also has his gun. And he looks at Ansu, who's completely helpless in an environment area that Lu Fang deems that he believes is a safe place where he is completely safe. And then he injects him with this liquid, throws away the empty syringe, puts his gun away, and goes to sleep. And Ansu does wake up, and Lu Fang's there. It's like, okay, we gotta get ready for the day and everything. You were asleep, so I just didn't want to wake you up. And they go about their business. But Lu Fang, what did you inject Ansu with? What was that suspicious liquid? I am scared, and it was never answered at the end of this book. So I'm like, please let it not be anything dangerous. Lily does get some interaction with the kid, and she's sent back to the Garden of Eden. And the doctor and Lu Fang were talking, and they just like say, yeah, it's gonna be a long night. Lu Fang's gonna be here. The food here is terrible. And Ansu volunteers saying, hey, I could go and make something. So Ansu goes back to the building to make some food, some soup and everything. And he's happily pouring some soup in the container once it's done, thinking, okay, I still gotta figure a way how to find a way to get to my spore. When he sees a news broadcast of the lighthouse, and he sees in the screen his spore, which is reacting to Lu Fang being near its containment tube. Why is Ansu's spore reacting to the person that took it away from its protector and provider before the story even started? Why is it reacting? Even Ansu is like, what is going on? So he returns to the lighthouse. Lu Fang isn't back. The doctor tells him exactly where to find him, and that is the closest Ansu has ever been to his spore. He is literally in the same vicinity now, and he's watching as, in his way, Lu Fang, who's just calm, neutral, and everyone's doing their scientific thinking, he looks a little playful with the spore that's moving around every time Lu Fang moves his hand. You know, like how a cat goes like that with the flashlight? That's what the spore and Lu Fang are doing. The spore is the cat, and Lu Fang is the light, And Ansa is getting really, really angry, and he calls out to Lu Feng saying that the doctor wanted to see us again, and they leave. And even Lu Feng notices that Ansa is a little annoyed, and he's like, I'm just gonna look out in the distance. And we're watching the aurora when the flash happens. Lu Feng saves Ansa. They jump to the ground when the flash happens, and they look out, and the aurora borealis is gone, meaning one of the artificial magnetic poles are down, meaning we are no longer protected by radiation and solar storms. What is happening? Using last minute resources and shutting everything down, we make contact with the other base, the underground city base, because we are the northern base. We finally make contact, and it's found out that they are under invasion by Xenogenics that have come out one giant surge and attacked the base and took out the machine that helped create that was the artificial magnetic pole, meaning our other pole, our west pole, is down, and they're asking for help, assistance, and everyone's in the war room trying to figure out how long we can last without it. And then they're like, do we still send help? And then Lu Feng's like, I will go help, because he basically is the only one that can help. And he confirms that Tsering, who is his possible successor, is able to take temporary command. And so with also the help of a pilot, one of the pilots that worked with that hired Mr. Shaw to make a mannequin, he's a pilot, so he volunteers to go with Lu Feng to go assist with the assistance of underground city base, which is about 12 hours flight on their little jets, their little hyperjet things. And he has Tsereng's unofficially promised to look after, Ansa. And he has this thing where it's his own little thing where he always ruffles Ansa's hair. And he kind of made a promise that he would be back and wait for him. Because Ansa said, I made mushroom soup because Lu Feng liked it. It's like, maybe when I get back, maybe he can make some more for me. And he leaves to go help with the base. And the moment he leaves, the doctor had a theory about how maybe we no longer need direct contact to become infected. Maybe it can be a weird genetic spontaneous event where people can be infected and turn into xenogenics, because we get a red alert. Tsering and some other judges go to where the research lab was, and they attack the doctor's assistant because the assistant said he showed signs of infection, which Tsering concluded was true. He was positive. And then that's where they realized, what about the other people that are around the general facility of the samples that they collected over time that can cause an infection? So all of a sudden we just start hearing bang, bang, boom, boom going around. And we do confirm that some people were infected without touching or interacting with anything. So that's playing on the back of our minds, as well as the 5-day period, because we have been in seclusion for 5 days. No one can go out because there's no magnetic field to protect us, and everyone's rationing their stuff, trying to figure out what to do. While over in the underground city base, the outside area has been bombarded. It's cleared for drop down, and while they're talking, Lu Feng and the guy who flew the plane for him, they're talking about, hey, is there something to go back to? And Lu Feng mentioned something, how he said the person that he wants to go back to, just to see, because he promised he'd come back. He wears the bullet that I used to probably kill someone he cared about. And that's when the guy said he remembered talking to a kid that asked about a bullet, and he's like, y'all have an interesting relationship. So I think Lu Feng wants to go back and actually communicate with Ansa to figure out, hey, about this and stuff, actually talk with one another, because I think he's gotten used to Ansa's presence. He even told him, I now believe that you are human. So they have this weird, interesting building block relationship going, which is cool. I want to see how this relationship develops. While back over, Ansa finally sneaks in. He sees the spore, which reacts perfectly to him, and he's pushing buttons trying to get the spore out, which is hurting it, but he still manages to get it out. The spore comes to Ansa. He finally reabsorbs it into his body, filling that missing piece whole, and he opens a window looking like he's about to escape, but then he closes the window and he just leaves, thinking when Lufeng returns, then I will officially leave now that I have my spore back. And that's how it ends. That's the end of spoilers, people. I believe this book was the perfect introductory to world building as well as introducing our characters. And yes, we completed our task at the very, very end. Ansa did get his spore back, and something's going on at the Undercity base that required Lufeng's attention. And it seems like that they're going to try to interact with one another again to converse, communicate. But when that happens, that blue suspicious liquid, is it going to come into play? And what's going to happen when Lufeng finds out that Ansa is actually a Xenogenic? What the hell is going on with these spontaneous exposures that's causing mutations? Are we going to get the magnetic field back up? A lot of things are running through my mind, and that's how we end up the book. Panic attack all around. But either way, this was a completely change of pace that I'm used to. And I enjoyed it, people. This world scared the bejesus out of me. I do not want to live here, but I was intrigued by the characters. I was intrigued by the world, the situation, what's gonna happen next, and it just left me wondering what will happen in book 2. I want to especially know how these two get in a relationship, because that's like, again, how. But either way, I enjoyed it. Ansa is my precious little mushroom that I will protect at all time. Lufeng, I know you have a weird way of connecting with people because you know your job requires many things. And a lot of people hate you for that, so you kind of keep a distance from yourself personally, from other people. But somehow Ansa's found his way into your life that you actually want to make it back to the northern base to actually see him again. I guess communicate as to what happened in Ansa's past. Sci-fi people and fans of that Jeff Goldblum's The Fly, if it's a real world kind of situation. And for people that just want to check it out, again, be warned, I'm sorry I didn't put this on the beginning, but again, people being eaten alive, people being crushed, devoured, corpses being eaten, torn apart, anything that an insect can do to completely wreck a human body is in there. So be warned if you get a little squeamish about that stuff. Again, I'm sorry I didn't put that at the beginning, but yeah, there's a lot of that made me go like, ha. But all in all, if you're interested, go ahead and check it out. I had fun. Can't wait for book 2. That's as much as I can say. Little Mushroom by Shisu. Again, I apologize if I mispronounced that name. 4 out of 5 stars. My name is Sarah, and